Okay, welcome to everybody to the Resilient Lawyer podcast. It's so nice to have you here again today. Perhaps you are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. It's still nice to have you. Today we have a very interesting and important guest, Melindi van Rooyen. So Melindi is a highly respected family law professional, social worker, and accredited mediator with over 2 decades of experience at the intersection of law, psychology, and conflict resolution. Welcome, Melindi. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you very much, Marijke.
So today we're speaking about the spirit of mediation. Now, I'm very intrigued, what the spirit of mediation refers to. But before we get into the topic, perhaps you can just give everybody that's listening and watching some background information, because you have a background in psychology, which is very interesting, but you're also an admitted advocate. So how did you gravitate towards law, and how are you merging these two worlds?
Okay. Firstly, Sonia, Marijke, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the spirit of mediation. It's one of my favorite topics. So if I think back, I think I always had an interest in human behavior, why humans behave the way they do. And as time passed, it became, how can we do this better? How can we manage it better? Because I think all will agree, if we look around us, there's a lot of chaos going on in the world. And that is why I think I felt attracted to actually qualified myself as a mental practitioner. So I did the social work degree, I did my honors in psychology, considered maybe I should do my master's and my PhD, but I never really saw myself in that way. But I always wanted to do my LLB. And after I finished my first degree, my father said, no, it's time to start working, because I wanted to do my LLB then. But then later on, I completed my LLB. And when I started, I didn't really know where I will go with this, because I never really was interested to go the traditional route. And I felt, but the answer will come. And just before I concluded with my studies, the answer came in the form of mediation. So I was introduced to mediation, and it was absolutely wonderful for me to see how these two worlds can actually link, because mediation is the perfect combination between the mental health world and the legal world, because you need a bit of both. I attended my first international conference on mediation in 2011, and I was enlightened to see what's going on in the world and the new consciousness that's coming. Specifically, this conference was about family and divorce mediation, and how people are really saying, but we can do this better. And that tickled me. I've been mediating since 2000, and I did my training in 2009. I've been mediating since 2010, and I've been training in the field as well since 2012.
Wow, that's quite a journey. And the spirit of mediation, what does that refer to? You said it's your favorite topic to talk about.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit of a philosopher as well. I always like to look at the bigger picture and see how can we think about this maybe from a philosophical point of view,
Yes.
And I think if we look at the traditional way that specifically conflict was dealt with in a law or in a legal context, it had a lot of consequences that the courts, which became part of our culture, did not necessarily take responsibility for. And often in the mediation setting, we witness the painful conversations that take place, the division that was created, the adversarial nature of this process that actually created so much unintended, maybe, consequences for the parties involved, that we really need to take 5 steps back and look at the picture and ask ourselves, what can we do better? Is this a better way? And I think, and I'm specifically talking about legal practitioners, also mental health practitioners, I often train social workers where there's a lot of expectations from the court, where they should fulfill multiple roles, which is not realistic. I think all of us has got an obligation and a responsibility to stand back and to look at every situation that we encounter where people need intervention, where they need assistance. And we need to ask ourselves, how can we do this thing better? Maybe the traditional way is not the best solution here. How can we create peaceful solutions? How can we create transformation? How can we create a new consciousness, which often is happening in the mediation space? And I think that's a mindset. And that is, if I refer to the spirit of mediation, that should become part of our functioning. That's a mindset.
Definitely.
Thank you, Melindi. I want to ask you, because you are in both spheres, is there a difference in how a solution would be resolved in a family matter on the normal legal path and on a mediation? Are people more comfortable in a mediation situation? Have you been in both routes, and what are the outcomes?
Yes. In a nutshell, mediation is a much more informal process than a litigation process. So I think when people go through a difficult time, we must realize that they experience so much stress from different levels, that it's important that they find themselves in an environment where they can actually be comfortable to put on the table what needs to be on the table without any fear of how can this be used against me? Will it come back to me? And that's very important, because mediation is a process without prejudice. And I found that it's as if people relaxes. In Afrikaans we say, "Jy laat jou ore bietjie hang." If it's a warmer, more, I would say, safer environment, that's maybe the word, where they can really address the issues that's on the table without any fear of this being used against them later. Because initially, if people were exposed to a litigation process, that would be the mindset when they walk into the mediation room, where they would be very conscious of, what must I say? What shouldn't I say? Can I really, put this on the table? And sometimes it's important things for them to work through to get to a space where they can hear each other, where there can be mutual respect, and where they can get to a space where they can put a plan on the table in terms of the way forward. For me, that is management. I often think about M. Scott Peck and his book, The Road Less Traveled, where he said life is difficult. The sooner we accept it, the better. It's true. However, we still can manage it. And the better we can manage it, the better it can be for us, even though it's difficult. And I think in this field of mediation, that is our first obligation as a neutral third party, to assist people and to create a constructive environment for them, where they can actually start creating a new consciousness and start transforming and moving away from maybe the traditional way of thinking, and moving towards something that's realistic to implement and that can actually support their structures the way it should be supported.
So Melindi, where does the process start? If someone from the the public, let's say, go through maybe a divorce or something like that, the first point of call is to find a lawyer. Where does the process start? Is it the lawyer that then, suggest mediation, or is it the awareness of, let's say, the client that knows that mediation is first an option? And of course, you need to get both parties involved, which might not always be easy. So where does this start?
I think both, both happen. Sometimes in my practice, mostly it's word of mouth. There's a lot of legal practitioners that I work with that do referrals. I think there should be a bigger awareness at our courts in terms of the presiding officers, because I often find that people are not necessarily educated on exactly what mediation entails. And then they think it's mediation, but it's not mediation at all. So, yes, I think usually when I get referrals from legal practitioners, it's where they will see the people and where they identify there's a better way. This people might benefit from the mediation process. And then usually the legal practitioners will do the referral. I will keep them in the loop in the communication up until the first appointment is set. And then I will continue with the parties, and we will only communicate again after all of the documents has been drafted, and they must go back to court. Sometimes it's word of mouth. People will contact me directly. I think maybe I could just mention it's very important that one party might phone you, and say, I want to mediate. Very important. It's a transparent process. So immediately you would say, please send an email, include the other party so that the communication is from the start transparent about this process. I often say in the training as well, the perception of being biased is just as good as being biased. And that would be the challenge for the mediator, because sometimes, even if the mediator is not biased, one of the parties might, for some reason, perceive it that way. And then you've lost the mediation. Both of the parties must have trust in the mediator as a neutral third person, and must put this process in the hands of somebody else to guide them through that. Eventually, it is their decisions. And I think that's the beauty of the mediation process. If we look at research, it shows that it's 80% successful. And I believe that the reason for that is it provides people with the ability to make decisions on their lives that can work for them. It's not a rubber stamp that says that's the way it's going to work. They can communicate constructively in the presence of a neutral third party, where they can have proper discussions in terms of, but what can work for us in practice? I will often tell parties, you are the experts of your lives. You know your children. And that is where we should get to put certain things in place to manage this in a way that can work for you. And then they can stick to the agreements.
Melindi, as you are well aware, mediation is now very much a buzzword at the moment in the legal community with all the new acts coming in. But what would you say, what does it entail really to be a good mediator? Because I think there's a bit of confusion amongst legal practitioners. I almost see it as someone who can facilitate a settlement between parties. But I think the role of a mediator is much larger than that. So if you can, with all the training you've done, what does it really take to be a good mediator?
I think, and I think one of the reasons, well, I thought mediation would have been further, at this stage than it is. They obviously, I think everybody is aware about the draft mediation bill, and there is actually steps, and we are moving forward to regulate mediation better. However, it's a long process. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it really requires skill to mediate. And I think often people don't realize. They think, and what I encounter when I train people before the training, especially legal practitioners will tell me, no, but we've been doing roundtable discussions, we know we can do it, we just do the training to formalize it. What I hear from mental health practitioners is, no, we've been dealing with assisting people with constructive communication in therapy settings. It's not the same. It's not the same, because you need a bit of the mental health field in terms of really understanding human behavior, really listen between the lines, what are these people saying but not saying, really see what is the best way to approach them, to assist them, to see something maybe from a different point of view. Because remember, usually you work with people that has been in a specific dynamic for many years with each other. So they listen from that perspective and they hear everything from that perspective. That's extremely important. And in general, legal practitioners are not that, much focusing on that, whereas mental health practitioners may be too much. And from the legal side, you actually need more structure. You need to get a proper agreement. You need to do it meticulously in detail. And that is where the legal background comes in and assists the process. So it's really a very skilled person that should mediate. And I think, unfortunately, luckily, the new mediation, the draft bill is addressing this. Mediators, in my view, should have a background, proper background, preferably in the mental health field or in the law field, and should have proper training in mediation to be able to combine these two fields. And it should be regulated properly, because if mediation is approached by somebody that's not skilled, it can actually create the perception that mediation is not effective or mediation is not working, or even that it can create further trauma for the people involved in the process. I can maybe just share with you, in my experience, and I've trained a lot of people, if I, on average, should train a group of 10 people, I would find maybe one, maybe two natural mediators, people that just naturally has that inclination. I'm not saying that if you don't have that natural inclination, you cannot develop into a very skilled mediator. And then I also find people that shouldn't mediate. I've had people that maybe went through a very high conflict divorce, or has got a history or background of that, and now suddenly they want to enter this field, and they want to, and the intention is good, but you need more than that to be a skilled, effective mediator. And I think it's often overlooked that it's a skill. It's not something that anybody can do.
And it's such a, yeah. You can go, Sonia.
Now, I just wanted to say, I think that is also, because it hasn't been regulated yet, is one of the reasons that a lot of legal practitioners are reluctant to mediate. I think there's a loss of sense of control over the process. And from a lawyer's perspective, you often feel that, you know what you'll be able to get for your client. The moment you hand over to a mediator, that might shift quite significantly. And that's something that makes most legal practitioners quite uncomfortable. What would you say to alleviate that uneasiness that legal practitioners feel?
So I can understand that. I think, and I think it's a mind shift that maybe should take place, where if you mediate, the control of the process should actually be in the hands of the parties, not that much in the hands of the legal practitioner or even in the mediator's hands. The mediator should be skilled to assist and to empower people to actually take this process and move with the process in the direction that it can work for them. And that's the skill. And I think if specifically legal practitioners can realize that and can find a mediator that they feel, but this is a skilled person, I think their challenge would be let it go and let it be, because that might be now the best for my client.
And that takes like you said, a complete consciousness, shift, in terms of how you've been practicing and how you choose, to practice in the future. Just a quick question. How difficult is it then to get two parties that is opposing against one another then to be open for mediation?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it depends how far in the process they are, usually, and that's what the bill actually, supports. Usually that should be the first route to try to mediate. I think, and I see it less and less, but when I started mediating, what happened is when people litigated and the attorneys don't know what to do furthermore, we don't know what to do now, then they refer for mediation. And unfortunately, then the gap between those people and the animosity sometimes just is too big, to move forward. And it might result in mediation not being successful. I've encountered that. Or it might take extra effort to get people there. I think, and usually I describe it as there is a turning point in general that I tend to see in mediation. Initially, and it also depends, as I say, on how far they went along the litigation route. Initially, there is a bit of maybe a power struggle, maybe, we're not sitting on around the same table anymore. Because remember now, and I want to get a bit philosophical again, the couple ended, if we talk about family and divorce mediation. But the family continues, and we should restructure that. And the moment that people start grabbing that concept of restructuring, there comes a turning point where they start working with. Even, you can even sometimes see it in their body language, where they will initially, sort of they turn away from each other. And then gradually, and they will only communicate with me as the mediator. And gradually, I can see in the process, maybe session 3, maybe session 4, depending on the specific case, they will start moving towards each other, and they will communicate directly with each other, and that indicates to you that there has been a mind shift. There has been a new consciousness slowly but surely started. I'm thinking about where there's children involved. I don't think when two people share children, they have a choice but to co-parent. I think there shouldn't be a question about it, because we know today that the divorce as such doesn't cause the big trauma for children. The continuous conflict causes the trauma for children. So you have to get them to a space, and at the end of the day, it stays their responsibility to start taking responsibility as co-parents, not a couple anymore, but as co-parents. And that's a mind shift. And the mediation process often lies the foundation for their future relationship as co-parents.
Melindi,
and I've seen it numerous times.
And I think what you said now about it's a parent's responsibility, but I agree with you. It's also all of us involved in the process, from the advocates, attorneys, and mediators. It's also our responsibility to ensure, specifically for the sake of the whole next generations following, that we also contain this, because I mean, everyone knows what route litigation goes and what it does to a family. There will You cannot go through 4 or 5 years of litigation and have a meaningful relationship afterwards. That is impossible. And then you have a family, you have children. That is part of this conflict, where the conflict could be monetary in value, but they are dragged through this for years and years. So I agree with your statement that the whole profession, in whatever capacity you are, should take responsibility to ensure that this cycle stops.
Yes. And I think it links perfectly with the new consciousness. I think when you as a legal practitioner, when you as a healthcare practitioner encounters a situation where the conflict is detrimental for the situation, you have to take a step back and say, okay, what would be the best approach for this specific situation? And maybe I can take it a step further while we're talking about it to say that, and I don't know how familiar you are with the concept of parenting coordination, because that's also a process that's quite effective, especially in your chronic high conflict families, where I found in practice that mediation is very difficult, and where parenting coordination, where your role is different. Mediation often forms part of the parenting coordination process, but where you really work with these people over a period of about 2 years at least, step by step, developing proper plans, a proper parenting plan that might work for them, breaking off all of the negativity, all of the there's often a lot of anxiety parents experience in this process, and children are aware of that. So sometimes it needs a bit of a deeper intervention, where you really take their hand step by step and actually get them to a space where they can work together as parents. I remember I was parenting coordinating a case, and it ran through COVID, so we had a lot of virtual sessions, and the child involved in this matter, she was 8 years old, very well-spoken, and she knew her mind. And in one of the consultations I had with her, we were talking about how the parents behave towards each other with pick-up and drop-off times. And she said to me, Melindi, they're civil with each other. And I think this is as good as it's going to get. And I think she's right. Sometimes we must also realize it won't be perfect, but it might be much better than if there weren't an intervention, if there weren't assistance in this difficult process.
Yeah, I think, I agree with Sonia, like she said, to stop this cycle, but it starts, almost with the profession in a sense. You've used the word consciousness, a few times. I don't know if you're aware or have seen the concept of, the conscious lawyer. There's even a book written. So it's quite a concept, abroad, not in South Africa though. I don't know what your perception is on that terminology, because it sounds very almost spiritual in a sense, the word consciousness, although if you look at the meaning of consciousness, it's awareness. I don't know, maybe your perspective.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. I think we often have got prejudice that we're not aware of because we're not conscious enough. All of us have got. We've got our frame of reference, we've got our backgrounds, and the only way that we can manage it properly and move forward and transform is by being conscious. It also links with mindfulness, from moment to moment. And I think worldwide, as you say, that is happening. It's a slow process, but it's happening. And I think each of us can contribute on our little space that we function in. So at the end of the day, hopefully all of the dots, can be linked eventually.
Yes.
I think that's the way we should the days are over that we can just do a thing because that's been done for the past 40 years or for the past 20 years. You know, I'm thinking about movies like, and I think you might have, think I'm a bit older than you, but The War of the Roses, Kramer versus Kramer, where it was this high conflict divorces, where the parties literally killed each other eventually, you know. That days are over. There's a new way. There's a better way of doing it because divorce is a reality. If we look at statistics, it's a reality. We cannot ignore it. I think for many years, churches ignored it. You know, a few years back, I trained a group of social workers in Namibia, and divorce is not accepted. There's not even a divorce bill.
Wow.
Because it's not accepted. People don't get divorced. You know, and I asked the trainees, how do you deal with people coming into your office that's separated or that's divorced? And they ignore them. They say, go back, go and fix your marriage. You know, that's in some countries, this is still the mindset. We cannot be there anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I love that concept of, you know, being conscious, being aware of not just the way I do it and the way I've been doing it, thinking of only, you know, the person in front of me, but being conscious of everyone that's involved, you know, to guide the process so that it's in the best interest of every single party that is involved, the opposing party, but especially the children. Thank you, Melindi. I think this is very valuable. Sonia, do you have any final questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you, Melindi. And as your brother would say, in the light of transparency, I just have to say Melindi is my sister-in-law, so we do have a lot of conversations. But thank you very much. It was very meaningful to me to have this conversation with you. And yes, I fully agree. I think we used to an adversarial system. We were trained in an adversarial system, but that is not the public expectation anymore. The public expects us to find solutions that's workable and that's in the interest of everyone involved. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much. And let's create more consciousness.
Yes, I like that. Thank you so much, Melindi. It was lovely having you as a guest, and it would be nice also maybe in the future to have other conversations. I think it's a big topic that needs, you know, more awareness. So the more awareness we can create, the better. So thank you so much. And yeah, thank you also so much for everybody that is watching and listening on Spotify. It's lovely to have you. Follow us also for more interesting and eye-opening conversations in the future. We'll see you again in the next one. Bye-bye.